Okay. Here we go, here we go, here we go. Three, two, one. Hello everyone, this is Corey with Camera Coach, and you are tuned into an episode of Full Frame with Corey. My name is Corey Dunnigan, and I am a photography teacher and a freelance photographer. I'm here to talk about anything and everything photography, so basically you name it, I'm probably going to cover it at some point in time. These episodes for Full Frame drop every Tuesday, so this is a weekly podcast. And we've been rolling for about 6 months now, and just not really looking to stop anytime soon because there's plenty of stuff to talk about. And so let's dive into just a little bit more detail. I mentioned my name is Corey Dunnigan. I own Camera Coach, which is a small photography business based in Waco, Texas. I do portraits, sports, events, products, headshots, and those are kind of my concentrations there. I do others, but that's the photography side. The other side to Camera Coach is photography training. So I offer photography education. So that could be things like classes for students or personal training for students that want to learn how to use their cameras and those that are in the yearbook and whatnot. And then also an actual training program for those that are looking to aspire to be photographers. And so Camera Coach is kind of a twofold thing, and you can find out more information about the business at photocameracoach.com, and you can also find me on social media. We'll get into social media, I think, a little bit later on. So social media, Facebook and Instagram mostly, but you'll find a lot of information there. So I'll go ahead and throw those out since I mentioned it. On Facebook, you can find me at Photo Camera Coach, and then for Instagram, it's just camera.coach. Okay, and so some quick sponsor shout outs and just general thank yous for those that I want to throw out there. Number one, Rogue Media Network. I really appreciate the hardworking individuals that are behind the podcast that help to publish and provide the space for me to record. So really appreciate them, Allison and Mike, the main ones behind the scenes there. And also just a little shout out to anyone that's working hard over at La Vega ISD. I was looking through my closet here, came across my old shirt. For those that don't know, I mentioned I'm an educator. I taught at La Vega Intermediate School for a couple of years back in 2005, 2006. So met some great people, still got some good connections, good friendships from that. And so just a shout out to you guys. I know what it's like working in the classroom and around the classroom and just on campuses and that sort of thing. So big shout out to you guys. And let's see, last but not least, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. We've got Mandy, Dominique, Renee, Kenan, and Corey. So thank you for seeing the value in what I'm doing and being willing to support. If you would like to support the podcast or even more than that, just any of my photo education endeavors, then that would be through Patreon, and I'll give you more details about that towards the end. All right, so I think I'm about ready to dive into my topic for today. And so today's topic, I'm going to continue with talking about specific tools or parts of the camera, if you will, and do just an overview. Okay, and so this is going to be an overview on a macro lens. Okay, and so a macro lens is a specialty lens, which is why not everyone has it, and it is made to focus at a closer distance than normal lenses. Okay, and so on my table here, I have a couple of items, and so I'll kind of run through these. For those that are watching the video, you'll obviously be able to see this, but I have a macro lens already attached here to my Nikon D7500, and I have an item that I will be photographing. It is actually the national championship ring for Baylor basketball, which is pretty amazing. So yes, big shout out to BU Sikkim right there, and then also I have a normal lens here. This is a normal telephoto lens, 70-300 for the Nikon, and so I'm going to take pictures with both of these lenses, and I will show the difference between the two at the same focal length and everything when we get around to that. So, all right, let's dive into a little bit more here. So I mentioned that a macro lens is actually a prime lens. Prime lens is defined by having a set focal length, okay? And so this specific one is a prime lens. And there are some that are zoom lenses that say they have a macro feature. They're just macro because you can focus closer than normal. And so, yeah, that's kind of here or there, neither here nor there. But I just wanted to kind of get into a little bit about this. So I love macro photography. And if you aren't familiar with macro photography, I'm using that word a lot, it just means it's close up. And so it's a really, really intricate close-up view of details. And so what you'll find if you do a Google search, we'll say, for macro photography, is you will find that people will take pictures of bugs and coins and all sorts of things. And the thing to me about macro photography that's really cool is it's just taking the ordinary things that we see all the time, right? But it's finding a way to make them look interesting by showing the detail in them. And so because of that, you're talking about detail, you're talking about a fairly technical type of thing. Because to show detail, you have to be able to control your camera, okay? And so I think almost every episode I'm talking about camera controls somehow or another, which might lead someone to believe that it's maybe important, right? So camera controls are really important. This lens is really cool. I like this one. This is 105 millimeter f2.8, so it's got a good aperture range, so I can really open it up. But the catch to that is if I'm using it at 2.8, then I'm not going to be able to get as much detail because I need a larger aperture number, which means a smaller opening in the lens, and that's going to give me a deeper depth, a deeper amount of detail than shooting at 2.8 or f4 or something like that, okay? And so I've got the camera on here, and I'm going to just take a couple of pictures, actually, because, it's photography. So I've got this ring sitting on the table, and I've got my aperture at f11, and I'm going to go with an ISO of about 800 because of the room here, and there we go. So f11, and we'll do 100 for the shutter. And I'll just take a quick picture here. You can kind of hear it trying to focus, and boom. So from about 6 inches away, I'm able to get a picture that's in focus. Okay, and I could actually probably push in a little bit closer and still do that. But if I were to switch over from this macro lens to my normal lens here, the 70 to 300, and even if I'm doing the same focal length, I do 105 or close to it, then the best I'm going to be able to do is probably focus from about 2 feet, maybe, something like that. Okay, so, and if you're ever trying to take a picture and your camera lens is just kind of back and forth, trying to focus, and it never does, that is because you might actually be too close. Every lens actually has a minimum focal distance, okay? And so if you get too close, you kind of get inside that focal distance, it's not going to be able to give you a clear picture, okay? And so there's some science behind that and everything with, like lenses and light and focusing and all that kind of stuff. But we're not going there. We're not going into like physics and light. But just know that if you are using a lens, right, especially a zoom lens, okay, something that's a telephoto that reaches out there at 200 millimeters, something like that, or even more, then it's very possible that you might be too close. And when you're taking a picture, if it won't focus for you, it's not really a problem or anything with your gear or you or whatever. It may just be that you've got to step back a little bit more. Okay, and that's a very common thing. I normally have to teach that to my students several times, just kind of remind them several times whenever we're starting to look at different types of lenses. Then they can see, oh, with this one, if I'm a wide angle, then it focuses a little bit closer, so I can do that. But as soon as I put on something that's more of a zoom or a telephoto type thing that can really reach out there and make something look larger or closer, then you've got to have more space. And so that is a knowledge that really is good for anyone. If you're doing portraits, if you're doing sports, events, real estate, all sorts of things, you've got to understand that aspect of the lenses, and not always just rely on your LCD screen on the back because it's tiny and sometimes you don't really see how much detail is there or not there. And so anyways, just so knowledge there is really, really important. Okay, and this is not a very long episode really because I'm talking about a specific type of lens, a very specific thing, and I'm going to do some samples and then I'll post those samples. In contrast, I will post the same type of photos, the same angles, everything with the regular lens as well, so you can see and compare. All right, and so as I mentioned, macro photography is one of those things that's fairly technical. If I need a lot of detail, then that means I'm going to use a large aperture number, which means a small opening in the back of the lens. Okay, so I was at f11. I'm actually going to push this to f16. Okay, and so what's happening as I do that, actually, I'm limiting the light. So this room's not as bright as as being outside or something like that. And so as I'm doing that, I'm actually forcing my photo to be darker. Okay, but it's also going to allow me to focus more. And then I've got to try to find the spot there where I get enough light and I have the focus that I want. Okay, and so I'm going to do this shot one more time. Right, and so you could hear it probably just kind of focusing. This is an older lens, and something that I do want to caution some of you guys with is making sure that whatever lens, even if it's not a macro lens, that you check for compatibility with your camera. If you already have a camera body and you're just buying the lens, then you've got to get really good at researching if that lens will autofocus with your camera, because there are a lot of older lenses and off-brands that are not, and you will have to manually focus. And so with macro photography, actually a lot of people do use a manual focus because they'll have it on a tripod to keep the camera still and that sort of thing. And so it doesn't really hurt to have a lens that's going to be just manual, right? But if you are looking for an autofocus feature, you need to make sure that you're good at researching, even if you're in brand. Like this is a Nikon lens and a Nikon camera, but this is an older lens from Nikon, and it will not autofocus with some of the newer models, the lower, I'll call them lower end because that's kind of the entry level cameras like the D5000 series, right, or the D3000 series. This will not autofocus with that. But some of the higher end models that are semi-professional or professional, like this is the D7500 or the D750, then it can actually still autofocus with the old lenses. Okay, and I learned that from trial and error because I bought a lens and I put it on one of my cameras and it did not autofocus. So you just have to learn that that's a thing, okay, out there, that not every lens works with every camera, and you just want to make sure you double check. All right, so enough about that one there. As I mentioned, I'm going to take some pictures of this ring here with both the macro and with the normal, and then I'll just kind of post those separate. And so if you want to tune in for that, that'll be a separate little post that you'll find on social media and also in Patreon. All right, so really, what was this all about, right? This is just about a specific type of lens called a macro lens. And if you have not really gotten into macro photography, then I'd encourage you to try it if you have the time and you want to even try to get just like a macro adapter or something, just to play around with it. Then you can just really kind of see what it's like. If you're looking to get into doing something like this and get a higher quality product, right? If you want to do something a little bit more professional looking, like maybe for products or something like that, then not only is your lens going to be important, but your lighting. And so I didn't bring it here, but normally when I do macro photography, I'm using an external light. I'm adding light to it because I'm using such a small aperture that I've got to keep the detail in there, but I need good light too. So learning how to light something for macro is, I think, the other challenge, along with the camera settings that you're using. All right, and so again, I highly recommend it, especially if you're the type that likes product photography. You like you maybe either just sit and take pictures and you don't really have to talk that much. Just kind of think through and treat it like a little puzzle. Try to figure out how to get a good shot of certain things. Then that's I'd highly recommend that. Okay, all right. So I'm gonna wrap this episode up because honestly, like I said, this is not it's not very a long topic, a big topic. It's just singular. And so as I'm wrapping up, just kind of reminders, when you're looking for, if you do look for macro lens, Make sure you got the compatibility, you check that out, and it's going to work well for your camera body. And then experiment with light as well. Okay, so camera settings and light, those are two things you're going to really work around with your macro lens. All right. So in closing, what I'm going to do is just kind of go over some brief information on how you can connect with us, follow those sort of things. If you're new to Camera Coach, then it's got three basic tenets here. We want to capture quality photos, we want to connect with people that love photography, and we want to develop ourselves and help others develop. So capture, connect, develop. That's what we're all about. Okay, so to connect, to follow and share, that's something that's free, easy to do, and just requires just a couple taps on your end. You can do that through our social media channels. So Facebook, again, is Photo Camera Coach, and Instagram is camera.coach. Okay, those are only two major platforms that we're working off of, and we're transitioning a little bit out of putting everything on social media because that can become a task in and of itself. And we are shifting some content that is a little bit higher quality, requires a little bit more work and time, into the Patreon platform. And so if you're not familiar with Patreon, it is a way to subscribe and to support artists and creators, musicians, all sorts of things. And there are different levels. We set the levels, and there are different amounts, and you can actually receive some extra content like behind the scenes content, or just an actual video of the podcast, all those sorts of things. If you want more details about that, you can check out patreon.com/camera coach, and there's some more info on how to subscribe and follow that way and support. Okay, you can also become a sponsor through Patreon, so there's some options there if you'd like to get your business some exposure through being recognized on the podcast with the title screen, and as I'm talking, then there's some options there. Okay, and so what I'll do is I'll actually mention the website one more time because that's where a lot of information is. photocameracoach.com. So all the stuff that we talked about is there, as well as my photo gear guide. And so this photo gear guide is kind of a part of the site where I have some recommended equipment and some links to be able to purchase those, find those, do some research on your own and that sort of thing. But most of those lenses are actually lenses and camera bodies and bags and all sorts of things. They're things that I've actually either owned myself and used or had access to some other way, just in practice. And so it's not really just kind of a random thing where I just threw stuff out there on the website. All right, so that's it. There's going to be some more information about some workshops and other photo education opportunities that will be coming soon. All right, so as I mentioned, I'm wrapping up. It's kind of a long wrap up, but it is what it is. Hope you guys have an amazing day, and stay tuned for more stuff about tools. Okay, this is Corey signing off.